Our next guest has criticized the Central Bank of Nigeria's cashless policy, which she says rather impacts lower levels of society. For Mrs. Adekoya, a lot of us are already cashless.
There are all sorts of channels, e-channels now, that you can use to make payments. Abroad, you've got eBay. We have similar type of platforms here as well, where you can purchase goods online. I don't want to name any specific ones, but so those channels do exist. I think they are robustly being supported in terms of technology. I think the laws are there that will protect the buyer and protect the purchaser if anything goes wrong. At the end of the day, e-commerce fraud still ends up on the question of the relationship. Is there a contract? At what point was the fraud committed? And who is liable? Now, it might be a little more sophisticated in the sense that, for instance, if a e-channel, commerce channel is hacked into and a fraud is committed, then it might be a little bit more difficult to be able to show that the channel owner had a responsibility to ensure that their systems were secure and could not be hacked into. Because their argument would be, our system wasn't hacked into. You were careless with your ATM card or with your PIN or with your BVN number, and that's how your transaction was compromised. But I think that with enough knowledge, what we're trying to do here has existed in, not only in other parts of the world, has existed in East Africa for at least 10 years, e-money. And so we'll be able to look to other jurisdictions for guidance as to, one, how to make your claim, what you require to prove your claim, and how to advise the courts in terms of address as to the decisions the court should make. I don't think anybody has too much to fear in respect of e-commerce transactions.
What's your take on electronic commerce, e-commerce? Some people say it's a relatively new phenomenon, maybe in this part, but do you think we have sufficient legal framework to support it?
I think we have a good system. I think the problem is still implementation. The Code of Corporate Governance is there. It's been recently updated. There are various organizations as well that promote the tenets of the code, promote what the duties of directors are supposed to be, management, what it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to run. But we still haven't perhaps educated ourselves to the level of what is our recourse, where we feel that we have been wronged by a corporate entity and it's the result of bad corporate governance. Many people are not aware that it used to be, I think, Section 370 or 390. There's a section in the Companies and Allied Matters Act that can make a director personally liable for loans taken by his company which have not been properly utilized. A lot of people aren't aware of that. And this is a corporate governance issue. We still need to educate ourselves because you still find out that there's a lot of insider trading going on, where somebody on a board mentions, rightly or wrongly, to someone else, oh, this is what we plan to do in the next 6 months. And then that person uses that confidential information to position himself, either with respect to the shares of the company or with respect to that business sector, so that when that initiative is launched, the person just makes a killing. The person who disclosed that information has breached the Code of Corporate Governance. But until there's sufficient education for us to be able to know this guy has done wrong and he needs to be punished, a lot of things just happen and nobody does anything about it. So the structures are there. It's the implementation that's the problem.
A lot of people are frustrated with some of the numerous charges, bank charges, CBN guidelines, POS deductions. How do you expect the common man to fight this, to question this, and to get some sort of relief?
How do we question? That's a difficult one, because the role is between the central bank and the banks as regulator, and then as between the banks and the customer separate relationship. Now, I know that large corporate entities have the wherewithal to challenge a bank and say, we've checked our statements and all these charges and debits are wrong. They're in excess of central bank charges. And either they end up in court or they mediate or they reach a settlement. For the poor man on the street, the customer who's just a single customer with 30,000 in his account, who feels that he has not had the benefit, I think there's a lacuna. In England, there's a financial ombudsman, where if you have a problem, you can just write direct to the financial ombudsman and complain. Plus, the banks in the UK are also directed to inform their customers that if you have any complaint, you can refer to this person or the financial ombudsman. We don't have that. We know that, for instance, within the Chartered Institute of Bankers, they have a complaints committee, and any customer can write to the Chartered Institute of Bankers and make a complaint. The Chartered Institute of Bankers will investigate. I know that the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators have a small banking scheme for banker-customer relationships, where a small customer can go to the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and say, I want to bring a claim against my bank. But it's still the question of dissemination of knowledge. There's an association of bank shareholders. When there are problems, they get together and they go and talk to the banks. There's no association of bank customers. And so each person has to have his own knowledge and be prepared to make his own individual fight. So perhaps what we need may be just a financial ombudsman who would deal with those complaints and maybe direct them to the right sources.